So yeah, observation, no code, Devolver. We're gonna take a look at this game today. If you have epileptic conditions, apparently there is some stuff to be aware of. But yeah, this is the game. This is observation. I didn't really know anything about the game until very recently. And I'm pretty damn excited, I gotta say. I'm excited to try it out. I have heard good things. And so we're gonna give this game a go. Just let me make some quick adjustments to the video here. Here we go. That should be good. Okay, cool. So, let's take a look at this title screen. Let's see what the title screen tells us about the game. Now, there is some cinematic language being conveyed to us basically right out of the gate, right? So, we've seen these kinds of images before. Anyone who has grown up in an era in which space travel is a thing, in which we have had people in space, will recognize this angle, right? This angle of a planet's surface with a piece of a space station in frame. This is, I mean, this might as well be like copyright NASA, right? And then those images, right? Those kind of like mid to late 60s and onward images of space stations, this kind of smudgy lens, not exactly like cinema quality, but that's been replicated in movies over and over. So just by seeing a shot like this, we're immediately drawn into Alien, Interstellar, Gravity, any number of space cinematic, whether they're sci-fi or kind of more realistic, we're drawn immediately into that language, right? So framing it with this opening shot has so much to say just about the setting of the game based on how it's set up, right? That this looks more like a outer space security camera than it does a kind of epic shot of space. This is the shot of a grounded, sort of semi or mostly realistic, quote unquote, like sci-fi game, rather than if we were to see the surface of the alien planet in much higher res with no artifacting. None of the kind of lens distortion that we're seeing, right? You're seeing the bokeh, this little thing that indicates an aperture in the lens. This is meant to feel like a real image. And then as you see, we can see the crawling of the video signal distortion, which adds to it that kind of outside closed circuit TV thing. The other thing that I think is interesting that reinforces that kind of grainy, like realism style, is that there's no music. Right? We're getting the soundtrack is like what would you call this? Dark tones for film. So these kind of like tones that we're getting in lieu of music, right? There's no sci-fi orchestra. There's no trombones, no trumpets. It gives us this kind of like absence of sound. And you see this in a lot of sci-fi movies and TV shows where they don't want you to have absolute silence, right? Like here's what space sounds like. Right? But that's not implying anything. We have this kind of idea where in production we create machine sound so that we can imagine, because this camera wouldn't have an audio pickup necessarily, right? This noise is for us to impart the sounds of a space station, the kind of emptiness of space. So the audio feed is as if we are looking out a window. And it's not even like there is a bit of that machine noise. Like if you listen, there's like a faint hissing, a kind of machine sound, but it's all artificial, right? It's not skeuomorphic. It's this kind of false, and I can never remember how to pronounce this word, diegetic? It's that word. There's a false sense of that because the noises that are being made aren't meant to represent what we'd actually be hearing, but they're meant to fake what we're actually hearing, right? It's that stand-in noise, the noise of space. And I think that, yeah, it's interesting that we use sound as a stand-in for a lack of sound because it would be confusing for us to have none at all. Yeah. It's exactly, it's like electric cars having fake engine noises. It's here to impart to us a feeling not of realism, but of sci-fi, right? A feeling of a science fiction space station. It's creating an aesthetic by way of the soundtrack, this kind of ominous humming. It also sets the tone, right? It tells us that this isn't going to be a space adventure. It tells us this isn't going to be an action game. There is an ominousness to it, this kind of minor, low-key humming. It reminds me a lot of like the early work of like Tim Hecker. Orin Ambarchi does a lot of sound that comes out like this. Chihei Hitakiyama, some of his like darker stuff, the less piano-oriented stuff. This feeling of like ominous ambient. It's a very cool sound, and I do like it because it gives me that sci-fi vibe, right? Like the reason I like those artists, those music artists, is because I've grown up on this noise and this space, pardon the pun, this kind of like cinematic space. Yeah, so I quite like that. I think too the very subtle menu is quite nice and reinforces this whole thing. We know that the menu is out of place, right? Like if we were actually seeing this scene as it stands, the menu would be non-existent. So using a simple font with wide spacing placed off to the side, I think that gives us notice it's not like Devolver presents, no codes, observation, the game. And then yeah, they do try to illustrate a sort of computery vibe. I think imagine this font as a way to set tone as well, right? Now, if this font had a big green, if there were big green letters and it had a big green rectangle blinking next to one of them as a selector, that would tell us something about the time in which this is set. So the fact that it is white and graphically designed to be like, it looks modern, right? It's a sci-fi vibe, not a retro vibe. Notice also the space station seems to be in pretty good shape, right? Which indicates the starting position of the game. So little things, little tiny things that illustrate kind of what we can expect from the game's like narrative, its visual and aesthetic narrative. One last thing that I wanted to point out, and this is an artifact of intentionality. This isn't the way that the game is laid out because of the stream. If you look down here next to me and up above, there are big black bars at the top and the bottom of the screen, right? And those black bars are there to create a cinematic feeling because whether we recognize it or not, aspect ratio implies a certain expectation of aesthetic as well, right? Choosing, because like a monitor, right? This is displaying at 1920 by 1080 or 2640 by 1440 or whatever. It's in a monitor aspect ratio, and then it's smushed down to letterbox to give us that kind of anamorphic feeling. I think it's a little wider than anamorphic, but they're making a choice. Again, reinforcing, because this is the aspect ratio that a movie looks like. In the same way that an 8 by 10 photograph is intentionally a certain size. When we see it, we recognize it as being like a 35 millimeter photograph. So aspect ratio is important for compelling us to understand the genre of something. If we were, for example, trying to make this look like a TV show, like an 80s TV show about space, instead of letterboxing it, you could put it at 4:3, right? And a 4:3 ratio would tell us like you're looking at a TV screen, right? A cathode ray tube. So it's again, it's a very subtle choice, but definitely a choice nonetheless. I'm really happy. Just as a total side note before we get started, I'm really excited. Look, if you look at the color scheme on the menu, it's almost exactly the same as the color scheme for my stream graphics. Isn't that cool? A lot of the time when I have those graphics up, I'm like, I'm clashing with the aesthetics of the game. But in this case, we have the exact same aesthetic. So thank you, Observation, for branding this game appropriately for my channel. Let's get started. Yeah, let's get into it. This is Observation, a sci-fi game from No Code. Let's do it. Okay, So, we're gonna get started. I have the gamma turned all the way up because the game itself is quite dark. You know, this is the eternal struggle of I have 3 monitors that I need to calibrate. I have mine in front of me, I have the stream monitor, and then I have your monitor. Now I can control what I see on my monitor, and I can adjust what I think you're going to see when I stream it to you, but I have no idea how bright or how dark your monitor at home is. So I will just adjust according to what I need to see. I will try to make it visual for you. And if it's too dark or too bright, well, there's only so much control I have. I can't come to your house and calibrate your monitor for you. Obviously, I'm going to leave subtitles on. I'm not really sure what sync to audio is. I think it's that they don't play immediately, that they typewriter out. So we're going to do those, and we're gonna get it going. All right. Okay, here we go. Ooh, I'm excited. Also, what's with that glyph? That loading glyph? What is that thing?